Imagine this. You're in a meeting at work, trying to stay focused, but someone's passive aggressive comment sets your blood boiling. Or maybe you're stuck in traffic and a careless driver cuts you off, turning your peaceful drive into a fit of road rage. Perhaps it's a heated argument with a family member, leaving you frustrated long after the conversation ends. Sound familiar? Now, think about this. How often have you let someone hijack your mood this week? That person who cut you off, that colleague who didn't appreciate your ideas, or the family member who pushed your buttons. What if you could stop that from ever happening again? Here's the truth. You have control over your emotional reactions, and mastering this is the key to true peace. You don't have to let anyone's words or actions dictate your emotional state. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wisely said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. By the end of this, you'll have powerful, actionable tools to stop anger and frustration from hijacking your peace. You'll learn how to take back control no matter what's happening around you. But imagine this for a second. What if you could walk through life completely unshaken by anyone's words or actions? What if you had the ability to stay calm, centered, and peaceful no matter what chaos or negativity surrounds you? Stick around, because you're about to learn exactly how to do that. We'll explore practical techniques that will give you the power to stay in control and regain your peace, even when the world around you feels out of control. Adam had always been the peacekeeper in his family. He was the one who smoothed over conflicts, mediated arguments, and played the role of the good son or good friend. His family dynamic was filled with drama and tension, but Adam didn't know how to break free from it. He felt like he was caught in a web of unhealthy expectations, with certain relatives constantly pulling at his emotions. Every time he tried to assert himself or take a step back, he was met with guilt trips or emotional blackmail. It seemed like his efforts to create distance were never respected. Adam's work life wasn't much better. His colleagues, while outwardly friendly, often competed for attention, praise, and resources. There was a constant undercurrent of backhanded comments, passive aggressive behavior, and even outright sabotage. He would come home exhausted, not from the physical work, but from the emotional drain of dealing with the toxicity in his life. But one day, Adam realized something. He couldn't keep living like this. He couldn't keep sacrificing his peace for the sake of maintaining relationships that only drained him. Adam started reading about Stoicism and found solace in Marcus Aurelius' writings. One quote in particular struck a chord: "Keep company with those who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." It was a moment of clarity for Adam. For the first time, he understood that he had the power to choose the people he surrounded himself with. He didn't have to continue tolerating toxic relationships in his family or workplace just because he thought it was his duty or responsibility. He could create boundaries, protect his peace, and prioritize his mental well-being. He didn't need permission from anyone else to reclaim control over who he let into his life. Marcus Aurelius' wisdom is a powerful reminder of the importance of our social circles. It's not about isolating yourself from everyone, but about recognizing that the company we keep can significantly impact our emotional well-being. If the people around us bring negativity, criticism, and emotional turbulence, it's essential to take a step back and reassess whether those relationships are worth the energy they drain. The first step in reclaiming your peace is recognizing which relationships are toxic. Toxic people often leave you feeling drained, belittled, or emotionally manipulated. They may be family members, friends, or coworkers, but the key is that their presence diminishes your well-being. Once you've identified these relationships, set clear boundaries. This means knowing what behavior you will and will not tolerate. With family members, for example, this might mean limiting contact or refusing to engage in certain discussions. With coworkers, it may involve standing firm on your professional space and expectations. Setting boundaries is about respecting yourself and teaching others how to treat you. It's not about being rude or confrontational. It's about asserting your right to emotional peace. Self-respect is the foundation of healthy relationships. If you don't respect yourself enough to walk away from toxic situations, others won't respect you either. Practice self-worth by reminding yourself that you are deserving of kindness, respect, and support. No one should have the right to make you feel small or drained, regardless of their relationship to you. When you practice self-respect, you'll begin to recognize that your emotional health matters just as much as anyone else's. Don't feel obligated to tolerate unhealthy behavior for the sake of politeness, tradition, or any other reason. You have the right to protect your peace. even if it means making tough decisions. Whether it's a toxic friend, a manipulative relative, or a toxic coworker, you can prioritize yourself without guilt. One of the biggest challenges Adam faced was the sense of obligation. He had been taught that family always comes first, that a colleague's demands were part of the job, and that he should always be there for his friends, no matter how much they drained him. This sense of obligation can be paralyzing, but it's important to recognize that we do not owe anyone our emotional well being. Sometimes we tolerate unhealthy behavior simply because we feel guilty or fear disappointing others, but this pattern only reinforces the cycle of toxicity. Adam had to learn that he didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace, and neither do you. When a person's behavior crosses your boundaries, you do not need to apologize for asserting your limits. Detaching emotionally from toxic people doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means maintaining your peace without being dragged into their negativity. When Adam started practicing detachment, he found that he could remain calm in the face of emotional chaos. He could still show up for family events, but he no longer felt the need to absorb the drama. At work, he could participate without getting caught up in the office politics. This emotional detachment is a powerful tool for maintaining inner peace. It's about recognizing that other people's behavior is a reflection of them, not of you. You don't have to take everything personally or feel responsible for managing everyone's emotions. You can choose to remain neutral, focused on your own peace while refusing to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. In the end, Adam's decision to limit exposure to toxic people transformed his life. He learned that his time, energy, and emotional health were his responsibility. By following the Stoic wisdom of surrounding himself with those who uplifted him, he found himself in more peaceful and nurturing environments. His family, work relationships, and friendships began to feel more fulfilling as he learned to set boundaries and protect his peace. By applying these principles to your own life, you can experience similar transformation. Recognize the toxic relationships, set boundaries, prioritize self respect, and practice detachment. It's not about being selfish, it's about ensuring that your emotional well being is valued and protected. You have the power to choose who you spend your time with and how much of your energy you give. Remember, as Marcus Aurelius said, choose your companions wisely. Surround yourself with those who uplift you and call forth your best self. Lisa had always prided herself on being a strong, capable manager. She had risen quickly through the ranks due to her hard work, her attention to detail, and her ability to meet deadlines. But as her team grew, so did the pressure on her shoulders. Lisa's expectations of her team were high, perhaps too high. She demanded perfection in every task, believing that if she set the bar high enough, everyone would strive to meet it. She thought that if she pushed them hard enough, they would rise to the challenge and deliver flawless results. However, Lisa quickly found herself frustrated. Her team, while competent and hardworking, was not perfect. Mistakes happened. Deadlines were missed. People were late to meetings, and ideas didn't always meet her high standards. Rather than responding with patience or understanding, Lisa's frustration would build. She would criticize her team's performance and at times even find herself questioning their abilities. But each time she did, the stress only grew, both for her and for her team. Her high expectations were creating a cycle of disappointment, resentment, and burnout. One day, after another round of frustration with a missed deadline, Lisa sat down to reflect. She had always held herself to the same high standards, but as she thought about her own journey, she realized that she, too, had made plenty of mistakes and learned from them. She had struggled with setbacks and failures along the way, just as everyone else did. In fact, it was through those failures that she grew and improved. What she was doing wasn't helping her team, it was creating an environment of pressure and fear. That's when Lisa discovered Stoic philosophy, and one of the key ideas from Epictetus hit her like a light bulb. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Lisa began to understand that her frustration didn't come from the mistakes her team was making, but from her own expectations of perfection. She was setting herself up for disappointment and stress by expecting flawless performance from everyone, including herself. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, she could shift her mindset and approach things with more grace and flexibility. Epictetus's wisdom about our reactions to events is at the heart of many Stoic practices. While we cannot control what happens around us, we can always control how we choose to respond. Lisa's frustration wasn't caused by the actions of her team, it was caused by her own high and ultimately unrealistic expectations. This realization was powerful, and Lisa began implementing small changes that would help her manage her frustrations and lead her team with more patience and peace. The first step was to expect imperfection, both in herself and in others. By accepting that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process, she was able to shift her mindset. Lisa started to see mistakes not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. She encouraged her team to do the same. By lowering her expectations for perfection, she found herself less angry and more understanding. Instead of focusing on the mistakes, she focused on the process of improvement. In Stoic philosophy, this aligns with the concept of preparing for challenges before they occur. In fact, Marcus Aurelius advised, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Lisa began to prepare herself mentally for the fact that things would not always go as planned. She expected challenges, obstacles, and mistakes to arise, and instead of allowing them to derail her, she started to embrace them as part of the journey. This shift in perspective made a huge difference in how she managed her frustrations. Another key practice Lisa adopted was flexibility in her expectations. She stopped setting rigid standards and instead created room for her team to experiment, take risks, and learn from their experiences. She no longer held them to impossible expectations, but rather encouraged them to focus on progress rather than perfection. By allowing space for growth, she found that her team became more innovative and motivated. Instead of immediately reacting with frustration when things didn't go as planned, Lisa began to practice problem solving. Rather than seeing setbacks as failures, she viewed them as puzzles to be solved. When a deadline was missed or a project faced a challenge, she didn't resort to anger. Instead, she worked with her team to find solutions and adjust plans. This approach shifted the dynamic of her team meetings. What was once a tense environment filled with stress and fear of failure became a collaborative space where everyone felt empowered to contribute ideas without the pressure of perfection. Reframing negative experiences also became an essential tool for Lisa. Whenever something went wrong, instead of interpreting it as a personal failure or an attack on her leadership, she reframed the experience. She asked herself, what can I learn from this? And how can this be an opportunity for growth? This mindset shift allowed her to approach challenges with curiosity and resilience rather than frustration or resentment. When a project failed or a team member made a mistake, she saw it as a chance to improve processes, enhance communication, and develop better strategies for the future. Lowering expectations doesn't mean settling for mediocrity or avoiding accountability. It's about accepting the reality that perfection is unattainable. It's about recognizing that mistakes and setbacks are a natural part of growth and progress. By lowering her expectations, Lisa was able to manage her frustrations with more grace and peace. She created an environment where mistakes were not feared but embraced as learning opportunities. She fostered a culture of growth, problem solving, and collaboration, which ultimately led to better results in a more positive work environment. For anyone looking to implement this mindset, the key lies in adjusting your perspective. Expect imperfection, both in yourself and in others. Prepare for challenges before they arise and focus on flexibility and problem solving rather than frustration. Reframe negative experiences as opportunities for growth and shift from a mindset of perfection to one of progress. When we stop demanding perfection and instead embrace the natural flow of challenges and mistakes, we free ourselves from unnecessary frustration. By focusing on growth, problem solving, and realistic expectations, we can cultivate peace and resilience in even the most trying situations. Aunt Linda had always been the family's unofficial critic. Every family gathering seemed to come with a new round of unsolicited advice on how I should live my life. She would make comments about my career choices, the way I dressed, and even my relationships. It wasn't that she meant to hurt me, it was just how she communicated. No matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough for her. Her judgments often left me feeling frustrated, defensive, and even angry. I found myself dreading family events, knowing that I'd likely end up in another one of her friendly critiques. One day, after a particularly draining conversation about my recent job decision, I found myself mentally rehearsing a speech in my head. I wanted to explain why I had made the choice, to justify myself, to convince her that I knew what I was doing. But before I could respond, I paused. I remembered something I'd read from Stoic philosophy. You have power over your mind, not outside events. It struck me that I had the power to control how I responded to Aunt Linda's comments. I didn't have to get emotionally hooked into her criticisms. Instead of engaging in a back and forth, I could simply say, okay. And so that's exactly what I did. The next time Aunt Linda launched into one of her critiques, I took a deep breath and said, okay. It wasn't rude. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic. It was simply a neutral response, a way to acknowledge what she said without letting it affect me. Her usual barrage of comments slowed down as she saw that I wasn't reacting. At first, it felt awkward, but the more I did it, the easier it became. This experience was a real life lesson in the power of a simple Stoic principle. We cannot control the actions or words of others, but we can always control our response. By saying, okay, I wasn't agreeing with Aunt Linda, nor was I dismissing her opinions. I was choosing to stay unbothered. I was taking the emotional charge out of the situation. It was a way to communicate that I wasn't invested in the conflict or in seeking validation from her. It wasn't about shutting her down. It was about protecting my own peace. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, reminds us that you have power over your mind, not outside events. This quote encapsulates the heart of Stoic philosophy. We can't control what others say or do, but we do have control over how we respond. When someone criticizes us or challenges our choices, we have a choice to engage and get emotionally entangled or to remain calm, collected, and detached. By choosing a neutral response like, okay, we maintain control over our emotional state and prevent unnecessary conflict from escalating. In everyday life, people often seek validation, whether it's family members offering unsolicited advice, coworkers questioning your decisions, or even strangers passing judgment. The underlying motivation is often a desire to be heard, seen, or validated. When we respond with okay, we effectively take away their power to affect us. We don't need to defend ourselves, explain our choices, or justify our actions. The moment we try to explain ourselves, we engage in the other person's narrative, giving them control over the direction of the conversation. But by simply acknowledging their words with a calm, okay, we prevent them from pulling us into an emotional exchange. The beauty of saying okay is in its simplicity. It's not an attempt to shut the other person down, nor is it an admission of guilt. It's a neutral, non reactive response that communicates, I hear you, but I don't need to respond emotionally. It allows us to remain grounded, to protect our mental and emotional space, and to avoid being dragged into unnecessary drama or conflict. For example, at work, when a colleague criticizes your approach to a project or questions your methods, instead of defending yourself or feeling defensive, try responding with, okay. It sends a message that you are confident in your choices and that their opinion, while heard, won't shake your sense of self. In family situations, when someone like Aunt Linda offers unsolicited advice, instead of reacting with frustration or resentment, respond with, okay. It doesn't mean you agree. It simply means that you are not going to let their words disturb your peace. This practice is especially helpful when dealing with highly emotional or confrontational people. For instance, if you find yourself in a heated discussion with a family member or friend, instead of escalating the tension, try simply saying, okay. It diffuses the situation and takes the wind out of their sails. Often, people who seek to argue or criticize are looking for a reaction. By not giving them that reaction, you remove the emotional charge from the interaction, making it far less likely to turn into a conflict. You may be wondering, how can a simple phrase like okay really change the way we handle confrontations? The answer lies in the power of non reaction. When we stop feeding into emotional exchanges, we gain control of the situation, we take ourselves out of the cycle of conflict, and we choose peace. Instead of getting caught up in the emotions of the moment, we stay anchored in our own sense of self. The more we practice this approach, the easier it becomes to stay calm and collected no matter what life throws our way. Imagine walking through your day, handling challenges with a steady, unwavering response. Whether it's dealing with an angry customer, a colleague who questions your ideas, or a family member who criticizes your choices, saying, okay, allows you to stay true to yourself without getting swept away by the storm of emotions around you. This simple phrase can transform the way you handle confrontation. Instead of escalating conflict, you diffuse it. Instead of giving away your power to others, you protect your emotional space. Saying okay is not about indifference. It's about choosing peace and calm in the face of external turmoil. It's about reclaiming control over your responses rather than letting others control your emotional state. The next time you're faced with criticism, judgment, or unnecessary conflict, try responding with, okay. See how it feels to remove yourself from the emotional drama. You might be surprised at how powerful this simple phrase can be, and over time, you'll find that saying okay becomes second nature, a tool for maintaining peace, staying grounded, and mastering your emotions in any situation. Sarah had always been the type of person to give, often to her own detriment. She was the one people turned to when they needed advice, when they were feeling down, or even just for someone to listen. At first, Sarah didn't mind. She enjoyed being there for others, offering her time and emotional energy, but over time, something began to shift. The requests grew more frequent, the demands more intense, and the emotional toll started to weigh on her. It was her friend Emma who had the biggest pull on Sarah. Emma's life was constantly filled with drama, breakups, job struggles, family issues, and she always came to Sarah needing emotional support. At first, Sarah was happy to listen, offering empathy and advice. But as the years went on, Sarah began to feel drained. Emma's problems, while important, seemed endless, and Sarah found herself carrying the weight of someone else's emotions without ever having the chance to process her own. Sarah became overwhelmed, often feeling like she had no time or energy left for herself. One evening, after yet another emotionally exhausting conversation with Emma, Sarah broke down. She realized that she was constantly available for everyone else but never available for herself. She had been neglecting her own needs, and as a result, she felt depleted and disconnected from her own sense of well being. It was then that Sarah made a life changing decision. She would start saying no. She would start to be unavailable when necessary, protecting her energy and mental health. She wasn't abandoning her friends. She was simply reclaiming her own peace. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "He who is not a good servant will not be a good master." This quote speaks to the importance of self care. If we are constantly pouring from an empty cup, we will eventually have nothing left to give. Sarah realized that by being constantly available to others, she was not being a good friend to herself, nor was she able to be truly present for those who needed her. She needed to refocus on her own needs and well being before she could continue helping others. Just like Seneca's teaching suggests, only by taking care of herself could she properly serve others without burning out. The first step Sarah took in this process was setting boundaries. She began prioritizing her time, energy, and mental health. She knew that her emotional reserves were finite, and if she didn't set limits, she would never be able to offer anything of value to anyone, including herself. So when Emma called late at night with another crisis, Sarah would calmly say, "I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. Let's schedule a time to chat tomorrow." At first, Sarah felt guilty. She feared that Emma might think she didn't care. But as time went on, she began to realize that saying no wasn't a reflection of her love or friendship. It was an act of self preservation. Being unavailable didn't mean Sarah was abandoning her friends. It meant that she was taking the time she needed to recharge. She learned to recognize when her emotional energy was running low and made self care a priority. Whether it was taking a walk in nature, reading a book, or simply sitting in silence for a few minutes, Sarah made sure to give herself the time and space she needed to refuel. She started to protect her me time as fiercely as she would any important appointment. Saying no and being unavailable was a difficult habit to form, but Sarah soon began to see the benefits. She no longer felt drained after every interaction. She felt more present, more engaged, and ultimately more compassionate when she did offer her time and energy. By being unavailable at times, she was creating space for herself to reconnect with her own emotions, her own thoughts, and her own needs. And in doing so, she was able to serve her friends better with more clarity, patience, and love. It's essential to understand that being unavailable isn't selfish, it's an act of self care. We can't be the best versions of ourselves if we're constantly giving without replenishing. Just like Sarah, we all need to recharge, to step back, and to prioritize our own well being. Taking care of ourselves first allows us to be more present for the people who matter most, whether that's family, friends, or coworkers. We can't pour from an empty cup, and when we try to, it's only a matter of time before we start to feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and resentful. Setting boundaries is crucial. When we don't protect our time, others will take it, and if we allow ourselves to be constantly available, we risk losing touch with our own needs and desires. Saying no isn't always easy, but it's an important skill that helps us protect our peace and maintain a healthy sense of balance in our lives. Being unavailable isn't about rejecting others. It's about reclaiming your time, energy, and emotional space. It's about giving yourself the grace to step back when you need to and acknowledging that your well being matters just as much as anyone else's. When we learn to say no and create time for ourselves, we are not only protecting our mental health, but we are also enhancing our ability to be present, compassionate, and effective when we do choose to show up for others. The next time you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by the demands of others, remember that it's okay to be unavailable. It's okay to prioritize your own needs. You don't have to be everything to everyone. Take time to recharge and watch how your energy shifts. You'll find that when you come back, you'll be able to give more fully with a healthier mindset and a clearer sense of purpose. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it's essential. Alex had always been quick to react. Whether it was a snide comment from a coworker or a disagreement with a friend, his temper flared in an instant. It wasn't that he enjoyed conflict, but Alex felt an overwhelming rush of emotion that he couldn't control. His heart would race, his face would flush, and before he knew it, he'd said something he regretted or stormed off in anger. One day, Alex's friend Mark pointed out how often he seemed upset. "You're really reactive, Alex," Mark said. "Have you ever thought about taking a step back before you respond? Maybe practicing mindfulness?" Alex was skeptical. How could pausing before responding really help with his frustration? But intrigued, he decided to give it a try. He began small, taking a few deep breaths before reacting, acknowledging the rush of anger before it consumed him. At first, it felt unnatural, like he was forcing himself to stop in the middle of a current. But over time, he found that he was less quick to jump into conflict. He was able to pause, reflect on his feelings, and choose a response that aligned with his values rather than his emotional impulses. The shift was subtle but profound. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by his emotions, Alex started to feel more in control of them. He realized that the more he practiced mindfulness, whether it was through journaling, meditation, or simply taking a breath in the moment, the easier it became to stay calm and composed. Slowly, Alex began to see that emotional mastery wasn't about never feeling angry or frustrated. It was about how he chose to respond to those feelings. Socrates once said, "Know thyself." This quote holds profound wisdom when it comes to emotional mastery. If we want to regain control over our reactions, we must first understand ourselves, the emotions we feel, the triggers that set us off, and the stories we tell ourselves in times of stress. By practicing mindfulness, we create space between stimulus and reaction, allowing us to choose our response rather than being controlled by it. Mindfulness and self awareness give us the power to pause before we react, which is key to mastering our emotions. When you develop a mindfulness practice, whether through journaling, meditation, or simply taking a few moments each day to reflect, you begin to understand your emotional triggers. You become aware of how certain situations make you feel and why. For example, think back to a situation where you got angry or frustrated. Take a moment to reflect. What triggered you? Did someone say something that upset you, or was it a combination of stress and fatigue? Could you have responded differently in that moment? Mindfulness allows you to observe these situations with clarity, which helps you respond with more thoughtfulness and less emotional reactivity. Here are a few actionable tips for incorporating mindfulness and self reflection into your daily routine. Start with small steps. Try journaling or meditation to bring your awareness to the present moment. This will help you observe your emotional reactions without judgment. Reflect on past situations. Think about moments when you felt angry or frustrated. Analyze what happened and how you could have responded with more calm. Ask yourself if there was another way you could have approached the situation that would have led to a better outcome. Practice emotional awareness throughout the day. Mindfulness is not just about quiet time or meditation, it's also about maintaining awareness in everyday life. Throughout the day, check in with yourself. How are you feeling right now? Are you reacting to something in a way that doesn't align with your values? Simply acknowledging your emotions can give you the space to choose a calmer, more intentional response. In conclusion, emotional mastery is a practice. It's about understanding yourself, your triggers, and your reactions. By limiting exposure to toxic people, lowering expectations for peace, responding with calm detachment, saying okay in the face of criticism, and being unavailable to protect your energy, you can begin to cultivate a life of emotional control and peace. Mindfulness and self reflection are the tools that will help you achieve this mastery. When you take the time to reflect, pause, and breathe, you create space for greater emotional freedom and resilience. Today, reflect on your own emotional responses. What are your triggers? How can you begin to pause before reacting? Remember, emotional mastery is within your reach. Your peace is your most precious asset. Protect it, nurture it, and watch how life transforms.